Good morning. This is the New York City Board of Standards and Appeals Public Review Session for July 11th, 2016. We'll begin with a special order calendar continued hearing items. Item number 1, 69859 BC, 2773 Nostrand Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay, this one, they modified the drawings as we requested. I don't think there was anything else.
Right.
Okay.
Item number 2, 1255 80 BZ, 3533 31st Street, Queens.
They requested a very long adjournment until mid-October.
Item number 3, 374 71 BZ, 205 11 Northern Boulevard, Queens.
Also requested an adjournment for 3 weeks.
Item number 4, 1122 81 BZ, 105 14 Astoria Boulevard, Queens.
They requested an adjournment for 2 months.
Item number 5, 826 86 BZ through 828 86 BZ. This is Grand Central Parkway.
Right. They submitted the drawings with the requested notes. I had a few questions and I wanted some other information put on the drawings. At Building 1, they have roof access signage that they show us that's simultaneously a yellow sign that says radio frequency levels may exceed FCC exposure limits, and also a red sign that says levels exceed. So I actually don't understand. I would think that would be confusing to people who go. They think, well, probably okay because there's a yellow sign. I don't know why you would have both. Also, they didn't indicate on the plans where the FM antenna is, or maybe it's just I'm not understanding the difference in the look. I thought the antenna is very tall and there wasn't anything to show where that antenna is, which is the source of most of the high frequency levels. And also we wanted a plan, we had asked for it at the last hearing, indicating the location of the control room and the fire department's power shutoff switch. And also a diagram that shows the location of the warning light, door sensor, and so on that's depicted in the photos and videos. That's something we wanted on the plans to clarify so in the future the board can know that everything's in order and all of that. So that might be able to be something they could do today. And if so, then I think we've gotten a lot of what we requested and made a lot of progress. Anybody else?
Item number 6, 7799 BZ, 255 39 Jericho Turnpike, Queens.
We have a community board recommendation to approve, and they didn't have any issues with traffic circulation, interestingly. I think, but I'd like to hear from others, that they were responsive to our concerns. The only issue for me was the fact that you can make a U-turn to go to the detailing area, but it doesn't seem to be the preferred route. But the community didn't seem to have an issue, so I don't know.
It concerned me, though, that I think they have an employee take the car off the lot.
Yeah.
So that moves the use off of the zoning lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I am not clear whether that would be permitted. It's moving now that use in the street system.
Right, it depends.
And I'm not understanding why they can't keep the car on the lot and detail it. Why do they have to move it, around the block? It just didn't make sense to me.
Anybody else?
I just had the concern about the illuminated sign, which they say only is used as an accessory business sign, and it was obvious from a number of us that went there that they were using it as an advertising sign.
Right.
And how to, stipulate that and control
How to
that.
stipulate not to have illegal signage.
I know, but, they should know that already.
Yeah. So, but they said they took down one of the sides.
They took down a banner on the
yeah.
side street in front of the detailing location.
But the flashing digital sign is still there.
Right.
Okay.
Item number 7, 80-05 BC, 49 West 33rd Street, Manhattan.
They asked for an adjournment of 2 months.
Appeals calendar, continued hearing items. Item number 8, 6713A, 945 Zerega Avenue, the Bronx.
Okay, so I thought, I mean, the appellant submitted very interesting NASA satellite imagery, which I thought was fascinating, from 1975, to try to establish that the sign had been in the same position since 75. My notes write very Antonioni blow-up style investigation because, you know, you're pixelating in and so on. But I'm not sure that that's actually matters anymore, given the abandonment of use question. So I thought that their very extensive research on the many examples of signs that apparently had been business signs and that DOB permitted as advertising signs, which had the intent to persuade DOB that they were legitimate signs. That's why you rented the space, to show it as a business sign. So I don't understand the idea of that the appellant is making, that now that after the sign was effectively legalized and there was a permit indicating that the sign was legalized by having it be accessory, then how can they go back and say that wasn't a conversion of a non-conforming sign to a conforming sign? I just don't understand the logic, and to say that everybody else was doing it and they were all shams doesn't really make sense to me, because the whole point was to persuade the DOB that these were legitimate signs. In addition, we have from 2000 the CPC report where they quoted at the hearing many sign owners who said that the industry believed that those should be acceptable accessory signs. If you've got a small business, that should be an accessible sign. The appellant also makes an argument, which it doesn't really pursue very far, stating that a business sign for cigarettes can't reasonably be accessory to a warehouse use, but in contradiction to that statement, it supplies, among its many examples, one of Philip Morris itself renting a really large warehouse for the storage of cigarettes and advertising supplies. So clearly there is a need for warehousing. So again, I didn't see that the sham was accomplished, if that's what it really is. Anybody else?
Well, I just feel that DOB, when they rely on the information given to them when they legalize a sign, and DOB does not have infinite resources to do the types of investigations that we're doing here. So even though there could be non-conforming signs that shouldn't be legalized, you know, they act on them as the information is presented, so.
Anybody else?
Item number 9, 23414A, 738 East 6th Street, Manhattan.
So in this case, the appellant cites to a 2004 First Department case of Byrne v. BSA to support the proposition that a CO is invalid if the building did not comply with all the relevant laws at the time of the C of O's issuance. But in that case, the loft board and the administrative law judge, and ultimately the court, determined that the alteration did not comply with the loft board's approved plans, hence violated the loft law, which, by the way, is a construction-related law. In this case, though, the appellant doesn't cite to any statutes or case law that indicates the parameters of the rent stabilization laws or DHCR's purview. Plus, as DOB points out, DHCR appears to have accepted the reduced number of regulated and unregulated units. So it's really not like Byrne at all. And I just thought that the appellant didn't make any real efforts to make the argument. It's kind of like, the argument is DHCR at one point didn't allow the elimination of stabilized units on the basis of substantial investment in the property, substantial renovation, and therefore it makes no sense that that the C of O should have changed. But that's not relying on any kind of law, and Byrne, as an example, relies heavily on whether, on DOB's compliance with laws that have to do with construction. So it seems to me without that, without us having some kind of statutory language, case law to rely on, I don't know how to get to a place that indicates that the C of O was improperly issued, because we do see that work was done. The tenants showed us photographs of the holes made in the walls to connect the apartments. A plumber coming in decades later to say that the work wasn't capped, I just don't find persuasive. Without more, I mean, because we get these little paragraphs. So I don't know what to say. Anybody else?
I agree with what you're saying, but then to me, the question remains is how to resolve this. Because they're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. And so I'm concerned about the advancement of this case once it leaves us. Because it just doesn't seem like there's going to be any way to resolve the issue, and they're not going to be legal.
So
They're either going to be not, compliant with DOB or not compliant with DHCR.
well, that's the thing. If they're not compliant with DHCR, we don't have anything to indicate that they're not, because the HPD records indicate there are 11 units in the building. And I assume, and I think we have data that says DHCR sees it the same way. So I don't think it's not compliant with HPD and DHCR anymore. It might have been back then. And the other thing is that we can't, because we're not HPD, we can't, and we don't have any authority over HPD,
Right.
we can't order them to behave in a certain way, ditto obviously for DHCR. It seems to me that the way this resolves is HPD, DHCR, and frankly, the courts decide how the tenants will be distributed in the building. At least we're not dealing with tenants in excess of the 11 units. There's only 7 tenants. So it seems to me there is a way to work it, and maybe our decision is a way for them to move forward and finally get the courts and the housing agencies to do their work.
To recognize the 11 units and just let it stand.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, as I understand it, the way the situation was presented, that this was in this building as it stands today was in violation of the CO, which required 11 units, and that was becoming an issue for the existing tenants also. So I think the fact that so far the documents have not indicated that it was anything but that the CO for 11 units that was issued was done based on the information that was provided and the work that was done, and that still, I feel that the applicant has not made an argument that it was otherwise, that it was 21 units. I still feel that it was 11 units, and if that CO is current and that is valid, then I think that also gives certain degree of security to the current tenants, that they are not residing in a unit building that is in violation of CO. They just have to address all the other, ECB or other kind of violations to make it compliant with the CO.
Well, the landlord's going to have to do something with the units. They're going to have to be
Right.
combined. The tenants are going to have to be partly relocated somehow. Something's going to have to be worked out, but that's not something that we have any authority over. But I do have to say that it seems to me, because I'm very familiar with what went on in that neighborhood back in those days, this was probably an intention on the landlord to use this to evict the tenants, which they succeeded in doing. Almost all the tenants were evicted with threats that they were living there in violation of the CO. So now you've got your 11 units and your 7 tenants. You know, work it out, right? Okay.
Item number 10, 16715A, 137 West 86th Street, Manhattan.
Okay. They did respond to most of the issues. I had asked that they clarify some notes on the plans, and then the fire department reviewed the proposals for sprinklers and indicated that they wanted to have, and I agree, sprinklers in the new unit. It should be entirely sprinklered, so I don't know if we've gotten those revised drawings yet. We need those in order to... Okay, and so we're still waiting for a DOB CCD1 response about whether there can be wood cladding in the staircase. Fire department sort of deferred to DOB if that's okay. And also, I think that the convenience stair that connects the existing floor to the penthouse that's shown as wood should be metal, because as fire department points out, it's compromising the fire integrity of that lower floor. We also need the copies of the approved LPC drawings. The certificate of no effect states that a condition of approval is that the structure does not have a grandfathered rear yard addition or enlargement, which is a very confusing sentence since the building has a grandfathered extension to the 4th floor. The reason they state that is that you can't get a certificate of no effect for a rooftop addition if there's already an enlargement. Then it goes to a C of A. So we need to know that. Okay.
And, yeah, I still didn't answer my question satisfactorily at this for me about the storage lofts in each of the apartments. He should show them. They're there. They have wood stairs, and I think the fire department should opine a bit on whether or not they require a sprinkler head over the storage unit.
So those are probably sleeping lofts. That's like a pretty typical
Well,
thing.
they're not supposed to sleep. It's not supposed to be habitable, right?
Oh.
So they need to get it
Okay.
on the plan that they have a storage loft. They're trying not to put it on the plan.
I see,
Because
okay.
they're not supposed to.
Show the storage lofts on the plans and the materials.
And the
Okay.
materials, and, yeah, they're there, they're permanent, show it.
But those are units, the lower units.
There are like 3 or 4 units that
Yeah.
have them, at least to my knowledge. There may be more, but the ones that are advertised as having these lofts and photographs of them, I'm going to assume that they're there.
Okay. Oh, so that's the, okay, got it, yeah. Okay, anybody else on that?
Zoning calendar decision items, item number 11, 9914BZ, 432, 434 West 31st Street, Manhattan.
Okay, we do have the DEP air quality sign off, and they placed a hazardous material E designation on the property, so I think we're okay now.
Item number 12, 3415BZ, 2316 Ocean Parkway, Brooklyn.
Okay, all the corrections were done. They were done before. The only missing thing was signed and sealed drawings, so we have them now.
Item number 13, 25115BZ, 127 West 26th Street, Manhattan.
The applicant asked for a deferral because fire department is inspecting the sprinklers.
So defer, okay. Continued hearing items, item number 14, 214BZ, 4605 Parsons Boulevard, Queens.
Okay, I think all the issues were addressed, including what I thought was quite a good parking space availability study during the hours that make sense, peak attendance times, which showed really that there were a lot of spaces surprisingly available, and not very many cars that are going to need them. The architect confirmed for us, based on his experience with Moss Design, that 5 square feet is actually adequate when you calculate how many worshipers in the space, because you stand shoulder to shoulder. I actually have seen that, but I didn't know. And they added opaque fencing and high shrubs on the perimeter lot lines, which is great for separating the kinds of congregating there might be on the side yards, and maybe even discouraging it. And the height waivers were clarified to include the dome, which is not a permitted obstruction. Okay. Anybody else?
Item number 15, 11-15BZ, 155 Dover Street, Brooklyn.
Okay. So this one, I think the main thing that was outstanding was the height of the building. We kept saying in the last 2 hearings that it was too tall. So this time, the statement of facts says the height was lowered from 39 to 35 feet, but which, if done, would have been responsive to our concerns that the building's too massive, right? But when I was comparing this submission to the last one, I don't actually see that the height was lowered, or if it was, I don't understand how it could have been lowered. The level of the first floor seems to have changed from the previous submission of 13.84 NAVD to 11.34 NAVD. That's the first thing. So we're not comparing apples to oranges, but also I don't understand how the first floor is moving. It's an existing first floor. And the measurement to the roof on the previous plans was taken from grade, which was 7.84 NAVD, and now it's being taken from curve, which is 7 NAVD. The floor-to-floor and floor-to-roof heights in the prior submission were 12 foot, 11 foot, and 9 foot, and the revised is 11 foot, 11 foot, and 9 foot, so that's a foot. That's not 4 feet. But I'm also not understanding that either, because it's the first floor to ceiling height that's being reduced, but that's an existing 12-foot ceiling height, and I didn't think they're restructuring the whole place. So I'm just not really understanding anything anymore about this height. So the architect really needs to come and explain what's going on. The original drawings, the existing drawings, show the first floor at 13.84 NAVD, which is what we saw on the previous submission, and the floor-to-floor heights of 12 foot, 10 foot 6, and 8 feet. So that's also confusing because the proposed is 11 feet, and it's with an existing joist, so I'm totally confused. And then there was an overall height of the existing building of 34 feet, but it's measured from, we don't know where it's measured from. It's literally measured from a point floating in the air without any NAVD allocation or anything. So I'm lost. Anybody else?
Well, they decided not to lift the first floor.
Right.
They're keeping the first floor where it exists.
Correct.
So they're not going to take advantage of the design flood elevation option to measure the height of the building. So instead of measuring from the design flood elevation, now they're measuring from, they could measure from grade, but even more conservatively, they're measuring from curb, which is usually lower than grade.
Okay, well, so
They comply with the, and it's not going to be a substantial improvement.
Right.
So they're going to keep their cellar. They can't add any new cellar. They're not taking advantage of the, measurements of height and perimeter wall. They're measuring from grade, just as if it was, a typical R3 zone.
Right. So they're
And-
measuring from curb, which is at 7, versus grade, which is 7.84.
Right.
So.
And they're keeping the first floor where it is, which is like, half a foot above base flood elevation. But they're going to live with that.
But the first floor So that's the thing, that the first floor doesn't seem to have been lifted in the prior set, was it?
Yes.
13.84 was the lift?
No, it was.
Yes, they were going to lift the first floor a couple of feet at least, yes.
Yeah.
Because in the last submission, they submitted a letter to us saying that there's no substantial construct, or whatever.
They did.
Substantial improvement. So then the last set showed the first floor at 13.84.
Right, and now the first
at
floor
11.
is at 11.3 something.
Yeah, 34.
Right, so they are not moving it 2 feet higher.
But the existing drawings show the first floor at 13.84.
I didn't see that.
Take
The
a look at
existing drawing?
drawings.
In which set?
At the very early submission,
I have to admit, I had that same question, and maybe I missed something in the change, but I thought they started out at 13.
No, it's 11.34.
Yeah, the existing, it's,
they revised the existing drawings.
I'm going by the original submission.
Oh, the very original.
Yeah.
So then they have revised, then I'm really confused.
Existing
How does the
plans.
existing change?
the
I thought
I'm
their
looking at the
set was-
existing submission dated 1/15.
yes, the first floor is 11.34 on the unimproved existing
Okay.
elevation.
Because I was looking at a submission,
And the existing home had a height of 34 feet and a perimeter wall height of 20 feet.
I had. revised
26 feet.
proposed- Sorry.
Right?
Oh, it's such a small thing. Was it? Oh, yeah, it does. Okay, you're right.
What?
The perimeter wall height does say 26 feet
26 feet,
existing.
right?
So they're lowering the perimeter wall height
To 21, right?
to 21.
Yeah.
And they're just raising the height of the building by 1 foot, which is permitted in the district. And they're not following any flood regulation, height measurement waiver, you know, like the
They put
different way of
themselves
measuring
out-
things.
out of it,
So
yeah.
it's not going to look
They're not
much
up to-
higher than
There
everything
are
else.
actually, now that I'm looking at it, there are 2 first floor elevation descriptions on that drawing of the existing house. A228, for example, it says first floor elevation 13.84 NAVD, first floor elevation 11.34. That's 11.34 probably, what do you call it? Manhattan datum or Brooklyn datum. Because it's, remember the data are like 2
The
feet
section-
difference.
I think my understanding was that that second elevation was given just to kind of show the NAVD line, but if you go to the section, 333,
Oh, I see what you're saying. So the actual is at 11.34, but they're showing where
They're going to
13
raise it to,
Go to, oh, I
where
see.
they originally wanted to raise it
raise
to.
it. Okay, okay.
That was confusing, because I read it as as it being the
It's not the
original.
best representation.
yeah, I agree.
So, but excuse the pun, the short of it is that the building is not being reduced in height by more than, I mean, I don't see how you reduce the building in height except by lowering the attic, and the attic is remaining at 9 feet.
Well, they're reducing the height of the building because before they had a base plane which was a few feet above what they're using now, and then they were measuring to 35 feet. Now, the base plane, the measurement plane has come down about at least 2 feet. So the building should have reduced in at least 2 feet. That's how they're reducing the height of the building, because they're not taking advantage of
Right, they're not
the
raising
flood
it, they're keeping it.
zoning
the same, they're
regulations.
just giving it.
No, I get that, except when you add the floor-to-floor heights, they changed by a foot.
Well, I
12
didn't.
foot, 11 foot, 9 feet became 11 foot, 11 foot, 9 feet. You can't reduce the height of the first floor, floor to ceiling, floor to bottom of joist unless you're restructuring.
You're talking about the
The
floor-to-floor
actual floor
heights
height.
in the existing building?
Both. No, in the proposed. I'm talking
Well, the
about,
proposed came down because they're not, the first floor was going to be 2 feet higher.
when they were going to lift it.
Right, so then you start measuring your floor-to-floor heights.
Okay, if everyone else is okay with this, I'm like,
I get it. I think it'll be
I'm
fine.
still measuring this and I get the same number. Okay.
Well, I'll look at the floor-to-floor heights later.
Yeah.
Can't
okay,
really
if
do
you
that
could-
now.
Okay.
The combination of keeping it at its
heights have changed.
original elevation and then
Yeah, let me just see the
lowering
survey.
The floor-to-floor
The
heights
survey
have to
tells you the
equal
first floor
at least 2
elevation.
feet in change, right? That's the,
Well,
and if they,
the original floor-to-floor height is 12 feet, 10, 6, 8. So if they kept the attic at 8, then the building is 34 feet high, measured from I don't know what.
right.
Oh, you mean this is existing?
Yeah, that's the existing.
Oh, okay.
So it's got, the building.
Let them go back and check their math. Just make sure
Okay.
that
That's not
either.
counting the floor.
Okay. Anything?
We'll look at it.
Yeah, just take a look and
Okay.
we may want, so for the applicant, architect should be on hold to come to the hearing, okay? Okay, good.
Item number, move on? Item number 16, 3915 BZ, 7476 8th Avenue, Manhattan.
I recuse from this?
So the applicant, I'm happy to say, took our concerns expressed at the last hearing, including the board's directive to respect the district's built form of 120-foot height and 60-foot street wall and have less zoning floor area than had been requested. The board had requested the applicant look at a building within the district's allowable bulk, and the applicant withdrew its last submission to us and gave us a new submission, which I feel was very responsive to what we had asked them to do, including reducing the height of the building, the requested floor area, and the extent of the waivers that had been proposed. In fact, I guess we only have one FAR waiver. The new alternate building is 120 feet high and has a 60-foot street wall along the 8th Avenue side and has 30,325 square feet of zoning floor area, which is reduced by a couple of thousand square feet, with an FAR of 8.21, reduced from the 10.1 FAR that was the original request, and the district, of course, has a 6.0 FAR. The building massing is really akin to its neighbor on Greenwich, which we had requested. The financials were adjusted as requested by the board at the last hearing with reasonable substantiated comparables, normal for the type and site of the project. Commissioner Otley Brown may want to elaborate on what was submitted in a minute. The board also received sign-offs for hazmat, noise and air quality, and also the LPC sign-off. The applicant must submit a remedial closure report prior to CO, as per the May 13th DEP letter, and as well as noise attenuation and alternative means of ventilation that was required by the August 4th DEP letter. Should we start with Commissioner Otley Brown?
Yeah, the financials were revised, taking into account all the BSA comments about the comparables. And I just want to say that the responses in the report alluded to the fact that there were arbitrary decisions made about which comparables were actually going to be used, and it wasn't exactly like that. The problem is that the comparables that were previously submitted were not really comparable, and so what we did is we analyzed what was given to us, and out of the comparables that were offered, picked the ones that were most akin to the proposed building. And that's the only comment that I want to make about that. But the BSA recognizes that the final financial submission was a valid one. And so it's accepted.
Great. Commissioner Montanez?
I didn't have any comments. I was happy with what they submitted.
Likewise, I think this is a good outcome of the project.
So do I. I think the applicant was extremely responsive to what our concerns were and demonstrated that they could indeed create a building that is harmonious on that
With the
corner
neighborhood,
with the adjacent building. Great.
Item number 17, 27115BZ, 1842 Victory Boulevard, Staten Island.
Okay, they modified the project significantly by increasing the size of the lot by 5,000 square feet to now a total of 12,500 square feet. So now there's much more space to maneuver for the drive-through at the store, to access the gas pumps, and to park. Now, the main thing that I see is there's a menu board, and the architect says that, or the statement of facts state that it's screened by the new building from the residential property, but I don't know how we would know that because we don't know where the residential property is. We don't have sight lines. And how are we determining that that's an adequate acoustical measure? It also doesn't tell us, we need to get specs on the menu board and an indication of the amplification levels. The DOT is also requesting additional data on how to determine what the parking, or sort of the trip generation is.
Yeah.
That should be used for the traffic analysis because they may not agree with what was used. And they'll determine whether more analysis is needed ultimately, right? And I don't know if the borough president has seen the revised drawings.
Been submitted to them.
Yeah, because the borough president was very opposed to this application, but I don't know if they're aware that it's a much larger site now. Yeah, okay. Anybody else?
I had it's more of a consistency. The statement of fact section of, for finding number B, where the finding is that it is not located, this is 73211, which says it's not located on an arterial highway or a major street. Based in that's in that statement, and then following that, it says the entrance that Victory Boulevard is a major corridor, while in that particular statement it says it's not, but subsequently in the subsequent findings it's stated as it's a major one. So I think we just need to be consistent in the document and present the argument accordingly. This affects in the way our resolution would be written. With regards to the menu board, it's placed right on Victory Boulevard, which is the commercial thoroughfare. I just want to make sure that I've never done drive-by order, so I don't know how it works. I'm opposed to it. I'd rather walk there and just kind of meander. That's my preference.
But you're opposed like from a personal preference type of thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but that's not the subject matter here.
No.
So I'm not quite sure how long it takes for somebody to look at the menu board and then make their way, because it's right at the edge of the property line. So right, the menu board is,
It's that angled shape
isn't that the,
as you
the
drive.
pylon?
Yeah.
Unless I'm,
Order window is what I thought.
Yeah.
I thought.
oh, so I thought it's not the pylons?
It's this thing they call an order
It's right
window.
next to
that
that
one.
one.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Announcing
Yeah.
Yeah.
My
the
bad.
property use.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
I'm
It's
totally,
on.
It's a freestanding
got it.
shape.
I can,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was reading the wrong sign. I was looking at the pylon sign as the sign. No, then that's fine. I think that addresses my concern. I just didn't want any backup.
And in terms of how long it takes, it's when the person behind you starts honking.
Could they just put the distance of the order window to the residential property
Yeah.
on the plans? So that
They
we can
did
just see, because it could be somewhere like 40 feet, but it's hard to tell.
Well,
Right.
actually, the next home, I believe, has a very small side yard, which was one of my concerns. And they said something that it's 23 feet from the building to the home, but I don't really see that.
So you want more buffering?
Isn't that?
Yeah, I believe, and then they also reduced the drive-through traffic lane from 12 feet previously to 10 feet now, and they increased the size of the building, and I don't really see why that's necessary. You know, there's an awful lot of curvature in this drive-through. It may need more than 12 feet. That's what I was concerned about, and that the buffering is not adequate.
And the plan shows that there's an 8-foot bypass lane between those vehicles that are standing at the gas station, and then the lane for the menu, for the drive-by. I don't know if 8 foot is adequate for somebody to drive by, to go and park their car, because a vehicle that is parked in the gas station is somebody standing out there filling the gas on whichever side the pump is and all that. So I just want to make sure there's enough space between that and that 8, and that's not going to create a conflict.
Well, they could actually shift the drive-through
Yeah.
aisle to the right. I think they have it where it is because they're trying to make
Make
that curve.
right, I agree.
But I think they probably can shift it a couple of feet over.
Yeah, it's just, I see that that's why that placement is there. If it's possible to move it a little bit, that would be the ideal, and there is space for it.
Can they provide us with an illumination plan too, a lighting plan?
There is one. It's
Is there?
very teeny.
Could they provide us with a bigger one so we could see it? That would be nice.
And it also, actually, because it's so teeny, there's not enough room for not a lot of numbers. So the last number is 1.4 lumen, where you actually need to see a place where it goes to 0 by the property line.
That would be good, that would be good.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay.
New cases, item number 1, 30214 BZ, 4504 Francis Lewis Boulevard, Queens.
Okay, we need a community board recommendation. They need to provide the hours of operation. There's the zoning calculation sheet, the BSA zoning calculation sheet needs to indicate non-compliances with the maximum floor area permitted for ambulatory care facility. I have bigger problems with this application, but they need to correct the statement of facts to indicate the existing building has a basement, not a cellar. In the statement of facts, the floor area has to be corrected for each floor, and it needs to match the plans. They need to check the parking calculations for ambulatory care, because the cellar is included in an ambulatory care facility for parking. But more importantly, section 24-012A in the zoning resolution states that Article 2, Chapter 4 for community facility buildings does not apply where a building, and that's what this is, an enlarged building, contains both community facility and residential use, and instead Article 2, Chapter 3 applies, which is the residential bulk regulations. So as far as I can tell, the FAR goes from 1 FAR, which is shown in the materials, to 0.5 FAR, which means the building is almost, the site is almost built to its maximum at this point. In particular, because they're not including the basement level and floor area, and you have to, it really is a basement. The exclusion of the lowest story at a residential building doesn't apply in an R3. So in order to kind of resurrect what I think is a dead application so far, they're going to need to provide detailed zoning calculation and analysis with citations to all the zoning resolution sections on the plan, and show it on the plans, and revise the BSA chart to match it. They also have to show compliance with heightened setback regulations, where they provide the dash lines to show that the envelope. And then, this is again assuming there's a way to work out the floor area, which at the moment I don't see. The criteria for the special permit is that the open area is consistent with neighborhood character effectively. They need to describe how it is consistent with front and side yard regulations for both residential use and community facility use. And this has to include what's permitted to be covered by driveways and parking under section 2564, since almost the entire site is covered by parking. They have to show how the open space was calculated on the plans, because even if you excluded this issue of parking, it looks more than what they're saying the lot coverage is. They also have to show that the curb cut locations comply with section 25-634, because I think there are too many curb cuts on the zoning lot. They show an attendant booth outside of the building area for the parking. I don't understand why that is, given how large this building is. They need to show a maneuverability diagram, because I have no idea how you're supposed to get your car out of there. You're like tandem car number 6 in the corner between
They have to move
two
all the
sets of
Yeah, they have to
cars.
move everybody out to the streets.
And in addition to everything else, the addition is very large compared to the existing residential structure, both in mass and height. There's this enormous exterior fire stair that's inappropriate in a residential neighborhood, and it blocks the bedroom windows. So it's kind of rendering this house like, I don't know, sort of like a service building to the medical office. I'm not really understanding it. So the residential building has been so compromised by the proposal, and so has the residents' open space. They basically don't have any, it's all parking. So I don't know what this application is.
I totally agree. Just the parking alone is very disturbing to me. Just the tandem parking, but also, I think that there's a bus stop on
Yes.
Francis Lewis.
Right
And
where that
they're proposing to
curb
have
cut
a
is.
curb cut in the middle of the bus stop, which I'm not so sure that's going to fly. Also, I may be wrong, but I think even with attendant parking, you've got to have a handicap stall, so I don't think they show that. Garbage and medical waste is in the parking area at their sort of basement level, so how does that work? How does somebody come in and pick up the garbage? And I think I need to know how close to the corner the existing curb cuts are. There are 2 new curb cuts on 45th, so I think it sort of goes back to your statement about whether or not they have curb cuts that comply. And then show the rear yard context, please, with side yards, because it's a corner lot, and how does that, how do the west and the south property lines, how are they treated in terms of any buffering or landscaping? It doesn't seem that they have any.
I agree with all the comments that were said. I mean, there are a lot of curb cuts, and the plans actually don't even show the existing curb cut for the residential, but it's a lot of curb cuts, 3 in that very small side of the street, and so I think that's going to be a problem for pedestrians. I think that the use of the site, it's just going to be too intensely used, especially when you consider the parking, which is an awkward layout that's going to require a lot of moving the cars across the sidewalk into the street in order to access the cars that are on the interior, and I have problems with that. I feel that the new building also looks very institutional for this corner, based on the photos, because I did not go to the site, and so it really is not in keeping with the character of the other 4 corners. And there's no landscaping for a use that's going to be very intense. There's no landscaping buffering them from the adjoining residential properties, and there's no space to put it either.
Right.
I agree with everything. The only thing I'd like to add is that they have 2 recent open violations for the existing home being a 3-family with residential use in the basement. And they, what do you call it, when you submit something to resolve the...
Yeah, no certificate
It was
of
rejected.
correction. Oh.
So it means that they have an existing 3-family building, which is illegal.
Not sounding promising.
Not so much.
I think You've all voiced my concerns. My additional concern is, one is there are too many curb cuts, but specifically that there's one exit sign that is shown from the driveway to, instead of going through this loop of parking, one can exit right onto Francis Lewis. And the reason probably that area needs to be more greened, because if it's not green, that can become an additional parking space in future, because that's just parking space to be happening. So if anywhere we need to provide more landscaping, that really is the place. I would have preferred to have the parking not be on the residential side rather than looping out onto Francis, and provide more buffer there and allowing that to become the residential, the green space, because right now the green space that is there, it's by the medical, which is likely to be misused. If there's a way to flip that, that would be a better alternative.
But there really shouldn't be
There shouldn't-
any
I agree.
commercial use next to the residence.
Right.
I mean, the residential property is just so compromised here that
Yes.
it'll be a misery to live in it.
Yes.
With all 3 illegal families. Anyway, okay.
Item number 2, 10115 BC, 830 Hicksville Road, Queens.
Okay. I just needed a clarification. There's some confusion about the address. So the address is shown as 830 Hicksville Road, 830 Hicksville Road, but when I searched it on BIS and on Google, it's 8-30. And when I looked at the other addresses, it's very confused on that block. Sometimes they're hyphenated, sometimes they're in the hundreds. I don't know what's going on, but there's a right answer. Just want to make sure this is the right answer. The statement of facts actually needs to be corrected, that the FAR for community facilities in an R2X district is 1. That's not correct. ZR 24-111 limits the FAR to the residential FAR, which is 0.85. It doesn't affect the project, but it's not correct in the zoning analysis, and that's section 0.85 pursuant to section 23-141. I thought the programmatic needs analysis was really clear and helpful, and I just had a curiosity about how the Colel is used. Is it occupied at all during the day, or only on those morning and evening times in the weekdays? And I assume it's also occupied on the weekends, but I didn't understand how that worked. That's more curiosity. I don't think it affects like the parking calculations or anything like that. I'm wondering what the need, there's a 10-foot 6-inch high parapet that creates this sort of pseudo floor.
Mansard roof kind of.
Yeah, but it's an open mansard roof. So you look at that and you say, great opportunity for a swimming pool or or rooftop play area. Is there some sort of intention there? You do see there's a slight slope in the roof for drainage, luckily, because otherwise it'd be a drainage disaster with that high parapet. But at the same time, the height of the building isn't atypical, because you've got so many institutional uses on this block that are the same height. So it seems like it's a sort of design affectation. I'm just curious, like, what's up with that? They should show the area diagrams to support the lot coverage calculations, because to me the lot coverage looks greater than 58%. So, you know, the little boxes that measure what the areas are. The required front wall height and the sky exposure plan I didn't find was clear on the proposed diagrams. They should show the location of the required front yard line, and the 25-foot maximum front wall height and sky exposure plane, as they did in the as-of-right drawings. It's just hard to see where the non-compliances are. And since the 10-foot parapet isn't a permitted obstruction, is the waiver for 38'7" wall height, or is that falling behind the sky exposure plane? I just wasn't clear because we don't have it in a diagram. And it's not clear, it wasn't, the 38-foot height isn't discussed at all in the statement of facts. It just sort of ignores that, and that is an element. On the compliance site plan, which is at the very end, I thought it was so complicated, I actually couldn't understand what the non-compliances were. So if it could be simplified to show only the non-compliant front and side yards, and to provide complying dimensions on those drawings as well, so we can see like how not complying, by how many feet. Also, the zoning charts and the comments on the drawings need to be internally coordinated, and also with the BSA chart and the statement of facts, there's kind of floating
Inconsistencies with site area and other things.
Yeah, I was just, at a certain point, I just kind of gave up. I don't really know which was the right answer. Also, clarify the location of the street widening line on the plans. And when I say that, it's just because I can't tell which is the street widening line. There's a label, and then there's all of these lines of similar line weights, so you can't tell that one's a dimension line, one's a street widening line. I just couldn't tell. And also show the, and take the front yard dimensions from the widening line, or explain why that's not applicable, because that was the other thing. I didn't know which one of the TPPNs applied to this site. The statement of facts says the dimensions are taken from the widening line, but the drawings don't show that they're taken from the widening line. So, also discuss the impact on the area of the reduced front yards, including discussion of those conditions on other properties on the block. That's relevant with respect, I think, to the other community facilities. I don't know what kind of front yards they have. And then provide landscaping drawings that show dense shrub buffering the existing residential neighbors, and provide wrought iron fencing on the side lot lines, and show the number and type of shrubs. And then they did provide a parking space study somehow, but I absolutely didn't understand how. So they measured the distances between curbs and so on, but then they didn't tell us how many spaces there are, nor did they tell us how many spaces there are at a peak period of use. So if there's no parking available, then that's actually what counts in terms of the waiver. But they did indicate a large percentage, I think, are walking. Yeah, 98% of the congregants will walk, but that's on Saturday. So who knows about the other days?
They say, I think half the people are expected to walk.
Yeah,
during
on
the
regular
weekdays,
days,
yeah.
right. So there needs to be at least some parking, and we don't know whether those spaces are available from that parking study. Anybody else?
I too had a question about the 10-foot mansard-esque thing on the roof. I was wondering if that was going to be used to maybe disguise the elevator overrun, but I don't see that on the roof at all.
No.
So maybe it's a piston, but it would still have some presence on the roof. So they need to show everything that's going to be on the roof.
Yeah, that's a good point. That would include mechanical, anything like that.
And indeed, if they're going to make an argument for keeping that structure, that might help them, but I'd like to know exactly what that structure is, because it's very large, and that would reduce their sky exposure plane issue tremendously. Also, they've got a rated capacity, I think, of 15 square feet per person, which comes out to, I guess, 180 persons on the first floor, but they show it as 178, and they mention that, but they should show what the calculated occupancy really is would be, because that's what DOD would look at. Otherwise, I think you covered everything else that I was going to say.
I felt that the impact to Frisco Avenue is greater than the impact to Hicksville, because Hicksville does have more institutional uses than Frisco. Frisco has like homes that are adjacent, And so therefore, I was wondering if they could do anything to minimize that mansard roof on the Frisco Avenue side to have the place look a little less bulky.
Okay.
Yeah, my only concern is regarding the apparent height of the building. I think it looks very bulky and massive with that roof line, especially in the photo streetscape.
Commissioner Shonda, any comment?
I think you've all addressed my concerns.
Okay.
Item number 3, 2016-4135BZ, 70 Pine Street, Manhattan.
Okay, so I don't know if we need it, but I didn't see any note from LPC about this. I see there was a submission made this morning or something that is clarifying where the acoustical mats are located, the acoustical efforts on the flooring. For me, my main problem was figuring out how you get in from the street. What's the fire egress? And I know they tried to show it on the drawings, but I actually found them quite confusing. And the ADA access, like I couldn't figure out which is the elevator that you take to get down. So it's just to clarify that, which they can show quickly on the drawings by labeling or showing a route for those things. We also need the fire department to opine on this. We need their letter, and since I believe this is in operation, or would be in operation shortly prior to the PCE being approved, I didn't really understand the sequencing of things, because there's already a C of O showing an accessory gym. So if it's already installed, then we need to see sign off on the alarm and the sprinkler. Right. Oh, you have a letter, I didn't see that, okay. Been reviewed, Okay, so, but this is egress lawyer, okay, so this letter is assuming that it's not an operating facility, right? So that's what we need to clarify. Is it an operating facility? Has everything been installed and they're just, allowing a few more members from the street to come in with this? Or is it still part of the construction process? Because there's a TCO, so I don't know why there would still be construction.
Well, I went on the website and it looks like it might be operating, but it also looks like the PCE's website is much larger than what's actually here. And I don't know if it's just that it's a health club that has all sorts of sports kind of endeavors. I think there's like a bowling alley and there's like a bunch of different things, all called La Palestra. So if they could just clarify what's actually PCE. Is it the 21,000 feet that are actually on the website? Because it says, our new La Palestra, our newest La Palestra, 21,000 feet of, physical activity, options and stuff, which is larger than the 14,000. But maybe some of those uses don't qualify as PCE, so I would just love to know if, or is there a discrepancy in the paperwork?
Right. Or the person who put the website together doesn't know the actual. Right. Okay. Anybody else?
You may have mentioned this earlier, I was taking notes, so I didn't hear your comments, but I really had difficulty reading the plan, especially I didn't see the connection between the basement and the cellar. I don't know if they're operating independently or if they are together, and if they are, how is it physically connected? Because the line on which the basement is and the cellar, it's on two different things. So it seems one has to go through one elevator core and then go to the other stair and something. So to me, it just didn't make sense. And also the kind of operation that are proposed in the basement is the same as the kind of operation that's proposed in the cellar. So I don't know if one is exclusively for the hotel and the other one is for the residents. If that's the case, that needs to be clarified also.
Right. Okay. I think it's possible that because it's a training gym, there are other separate places for different trainers, but I don't know.
I guess I need to better understand the operational plan.
Okay.
This concludes the public review session for July 11, 2016.